Hello and welcome to the Sustainability Leaders series. I'm Oriel Morrison. Technological innovations are fundamentally changing the way we live, work and play, as well as being critical to solving the challenges of climate change and a powerful enabler across the value chain. Joining us now to talk more about the role of technology is Winston Chow, Associate Professor of Science, Technology and Society at Singapore Management University. Professor, welcome. It's great to have you with us today. Now, you've spent a lot of time on the impact technology has had and, of course, is still having on our lives. Are we innovating fast enough?
Firstly, thank you for having me here. To answer your question, yes, I think innovation is proceeding well because it's responding to the important challenges that climate disruption, climate change is having all across societies around the world. So there is that impetus in order to develop technology and innovation in order to provide a viable solution for a whole swath of society as we deal with climate change.
Do we need to rethink the way we approach technology? You know, when we think about the traditional approaches to technology?
Yes, we should. Previously, I think a lot of the thinking behind how we apply technology as a solution has been rather siloed. One way to rethink or to reimagine it is to view climate solutions as how it affects a system. So I work in terms of looking at climate impacts. I research on climate impacts and climate change. We find out that looking at solutions across the entire urban system, we can see how best better urban design or new technologies in transport can affect different aspects of the urban system and urban society. And we can see that thinking across silos can help tremendously with looking at how effective these solutions can be.
Can you point to one place, Professor, where it will have the biggest impact? I mean, we know that, for example, in healthcare, innovation in technology is saving lives. We know that in finance, it's allowing inclusivity, on a global basis. Can you point to one place when it comes to climate change and sustainability that technology will have the biggest impact?
I can think of two actually. One is with energy use. We know that the biggest drivers of climate change come from our addiction. I'll be frank, our addiction with fossil fuels to generate electricity for cities and settlements and power our infrastructure throughout. The technologies towards renewable energy, that I think is essential and is the best way forward to enhance our mitigation goals as a society and as a planet, and as well as address the broader sustainable development goals. But the second thing I want to point out is that don't be so fixated as technology as an end. It is a means to an end because we have to address who uses the technology. So you talked a bit about inclusivity, and we have to make sure that everyone on this planet, we are one society.
Well, you just talked about detrimental impacts. This is interesting because there is a significant downside that comes along with some parts of technology. I mean, electrical devices, if you look at that for one, responsible for 27% of greenhouse gas emissions. How do we balance out that downside? Because on top of that, then you've got e-waste, which is a huge problem.
We can try and balance that out, as I said, through the human aspect. Education is one thing. If consumers, if policymakers, if stakeholders understand that, technology is not a panacea, it's not a silver bullet to all our answers. If we understand that the excessive waste, the e-waste issue, can be addressed by people being more cognizant that there is that sort of footprint involved in extracting resources and using them. If we move away from, let's say, a fast fashion culture towards more sustainable consumption, then that sort of drive, that sort of the human understanding with that information that people are aware of this impact there, it can help change behaviors. It can help change the demand side of this market equation for consumers to demand more sustainable products, for instance. So people on the supply side can then respond accordingly, and the net result is that we improve our overall sustainable development.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're all hoping for that. Winston, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Winston Chow with us there. Wavemaker Impact is the first climatech venture builder in Southeast Asia. Its goal is to reduce 10% of global carbon emissions. I'm joined now by Marie Chong, founding partner of Wavemaker Impact. Marie, welcome. Now, you focus your time and your investment where you can have the most climate impact. How do you measure that?
Hi, thank you very much for the opportunity to share a bit more about Wavemaker Impact and for having me. So we choose to focus on carbon CO2e, so carbon emissions equivalent as our kind of North Star metric. And we're looking to build companies that have the potential to abate 100 megatons of CO2e at scale and be $100 million businesses. So our criteria is to try and find businesses that have a very direct link to real world change, so changing behavior or accelerating the deployment of technology. That's how we kind of measure and quantify the impact that we have.
How much more attention are you getting now, and how much more are people coming to you to help them build and find these solutions than, say, 2 to 5 years ago?
I mean, I think, first of all, there's a huge paradigm shift in the way that a lot of people and a lot of businesses are starting to think about the importance of climate and the importance of building climate resilient business models in order to in order to build sustainable and long lasting businesses in the future. So I think there's a lot more interest in the space. But the reason that we decided to start a climate tech venture builders is simply because we didn't feel that there were enough entrepreneurs and enough companies that were looking at the biggest driver of emissions in the region. As an example, we hear this stat all the time that there's over 100 electric 2 and 3 wheeler companies in India, for example. Mobility is only 13% of the emissions in Southeast Asia. And yet globally it attracts 60% of the funding. So, on the other hand, on one hand, all the investors and all the money is going into a particular space. And yet, not enough is being focused on the biggest drivers of emissions, which are things like land use change and agriculture, energy in the built environment.
So since the start of the Wavemaker journey, how many successful ventures do you have?
So we launched at the end of October last year. And since then, we've made investments in 2 ventures. The first is a company called Agros. I believe Max will be joining us as well, that looks to decarbonize smallholder horticultural farmers in Southeast Asia. The second company is WasteX, which is looking to help small agri-producers such as SME rice mills or palm oil mills upcycle their waste into higher value, climate positive byproducts that then can be sold for a much higher value than their current waste streams are. We're currently working on another build with a founder that will be all about accelerating the deployment of solar in the region.
And given the environment that we're in right now, Marie, how quickly do you think Wavemaker is going to grow?
Well, our plan is to build 15 to 20 companies with our first fund, and to really prove this model that you don't have to think about impact or dollars, but you can bring the two together. And we're hoping with our first 5 or 6 companies, we'll show enough traction and track record to enable us to raise a much larger fund, which can then expand our efforts in the region, but then also start to look beyond. So, our whole model starts with creating a carbon map for the region. And this is important because emissions are incredibly decentralized, they're incredibly local, and they're embedded. So if you want to know what's really going to make a difference in the region that you live in, then you have to understand, where your emissions are coming from.
Well, we look forward to watching you grow. Marie, thank you so much for joining us today and telling us your story.
Thank you.
Agros has a vision to double the return on investment of 100,000 crop farmers while reducing greenhouse gas emissions, all by 2030. We're joined now by Max Neelan, founder and CEO. Max, welcome. How did the idea of Agros come about?
Hi, Ariel. So great to be here. So Agros started 2 years ago when I was still working as a consultant for NG Factory, which was an incubator for new companies. And we're looking at how to use renewable energy to decarbonize agriculture across the region. And after traveling across multiple countries across the region, we identified there was a unique opportunity to launch a new venture.
Well, why do you think investors are so interested in what you're doing at Agros?
Yeah, it's this. The thing is that when everyone talks about reducing emissions, the obvious investment is always electric vehicles and other things. One that is always overlooked is agriculture because a lot of people don't really know how to reduce those emissions. It's a very complex, it's very dispersed across 500 million smallholder farmers, for example. And so they're very interested when they hear our unique solutions, which combines technology, inputs, financing, and advisory as a holistic solution to reduce those emissions, as well as a component for farmers that allows them to increase their profits. So it's really important for us that we're just not gonna reduce their emissions without them benefiting from it. So that's really key.
So what's the next step for Agros? You said you've got a capital raise coming up?
Yeah, so we got a capital raise coming up. I think we're now active in 2 countries. We want to use that capital to expand to a 3rd country and launch our 2nd product line. So for now, we have 1 product line in 2 countries, and we're going to expand 2 product lines in 3 countries, as well as growing the team and penetrate our existing markets.
What's the biggest hurdle that you're facing at the moment, Max?
I think it's the fragmentation of the smallholder farmers. So we're talking about farmers with between 1 to 5 hectares. So it's the customer acquisition is keeping that cost down, but also the effectiveness of how many farmers you can realistically onboard within a month. That's 2 factors where we're constantly looking at to lower that cost down, as well as making it more effective through digital means and working with existing cooperatives to tap into groups of farmers rather than one by one.
Okay. Max, it's been great to have you with us today. Thank you so much for joining us and congratulations on all that you're doing with Agros.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
And that wraps it up for this episode of the Sustainability Leaders series. I'm Oriel Morrison. For more, head to apacnetwork.com.